Welcome everyone! Today we're jumping right into something that's not only financially massive, but deeply personal, building your very own reinforced cement concrete, or RCC, house. Listen, if you're the owner overseeing the construction of your future home, you aren't just the person paying the bills. You are literally the ultimate quality control. So, this explainer is going to equip you with the absolute essential checkpoints you need to make sure your home is built safely, strongly, and strictly to code.
Think about this for a second. What actually separates a multi-generational fortress from a house that starts showing terrifying settlement cracks before you've even unpacked? Your emotional and financial investments are entirely on the line here, right? And the answer isn't always the size of your budget. The real difference, the thing that makes or breaks the whole project, comes down to site supervision and enforcing the standards.
I want to start with a quote from structural expert M.S. Shetty because this completely shifted my perspective. He notes, "There is an old saying that broken stone, sand, and cement make good concrete, but the same proportion also make bad concrete. It depends on the man on the job." That is absolutely crucial. The exact same raw ingredients can give you a structural masterpiece or a total disaster. It is all about the execution.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We're going to follow the chronological life cycle of your construction process across 5 phases. First, the stakes of concrete. Second, inspecting your raw materials. Third, mixing and placing rules. Fourth, the critical curing phase. And finally, your role as supervisor. Starting off with phase 1. 1. The stakes of concrete. Why your watchful eye matters. Before we get into the technical weeds, we really have to talk about the sheer permanence of pouring concrete. Whether it's a massive cooling tower or the foundation of your own family home, the engineering standards are remarkably similar and the consequences of failure are exactly the same. As the National IS 456 building standard points out, concrete is incredibly difficult and expensive to alter once it's placed. If steel is displaced during the pour or a bad batch is used, you can't just unpour it. Mistakes quite literally harden into stone. It's a structural nightmare to fix after the fact.
Let's move on to phase 2. 2. Inspecting your raw materials, the ingredients for success. Because your job as a homeowner actually begins the second a delivery truck pulls up to your site.
Here's a hard, non-negotiable rule that surprised me. Reject cement stored for more than 3 months. According to concrete technology standards, when cement sits around in jute bags and local storage, it absorbs moisture straight from the air. Over time, it chemically reacts with that moisture and loses its binding power. Do not let a contractor use old, hardened cement bags just to save a few bucks. Confidently check those manufacturing dates on delivery and simply reject anything over 3 months old. Now, what about the water used for mixing? There's an old industry saying that if water is fit for drinking, it's fit for making concrete. But you know what? That's not strictly true. Sometimes, perfectly safe drinking water can actually destroy your concrete structure. And conversely, some water that you'd never drink can be completely fine for construction. What's truly fascinating are the invisible enemies hiding in the water supply. For example, even trace amounts of sugar in drinking water, which is totally fine for us, can severely disrupt the chemical setting process, drastically dropping the concrete strength. On the flip side, water with algae, high pH levels, or excessive chlorides from coastal environments might look clear, but those chlorides will penetrate the wet concrete and rapidly corrode your embedded steel reinforcement from the inside out. If you're ever unsure, demand your contractor test the site water against distilled water to make sure it's safe. Okay, you've secured pristine materials. Phase 3 is where things get moving. 3. Mixing and placing rules. Execution is everything. How your workers load the mixing hopper is absolutely vital. You might think they just dump a bag of cement in and throw rocks on top. Actually, no. The correct sequence is basically a sandwich. First, half the coarse aggregate goes in, then half the fine aggregate, then the full bag of cement right in the middle, followed by the remaining aggregates on top. Why? Well, this precise order stops the lightweight cement powder from just blowing away in the wind while it's being discharged into the mixing drum. When that mechanical mixer gets going, loading it up using that sandwich method guarantees a completely homogeneous, unsegregated blend. You're looking for a smooth, unified paste that evenly coats every single piece of stone rather than a chaotic, clumpy dump of dry rocks.
So, keeping all that in mind, the crucial point I want you to remember is this exact number, 1.5. Seriously, keep this number in the back of your mind when you're standing on site watching your walls being poured. 1.5 meters is the absolute maximum freefall height for pouring concrete officially mandated by the IS 450 standard. If your laborers are standing way up at the top of a tall column formwork and just dropping concrete all the way down from, say, 3 meters high, gravity just takes over. The heavy stones fall faster and separate entirely from the cement paste. This is known as segregation. The bottom of your column will basically just be a pile of loose rocks with zero structural integrity. Enforcing that 1.5 meter limit is an absolute must.
After the pour is finally done, we enter Phase 4. 4, the critical curing phase. Don't rush the hardening. Here is the big secret about concrete. It doesn't dry out, it hydrates. It needs moisture and time to build strength.
This leads to a very strict timeline for removing formwork. Contractors almost always want to strip wooden forms immediately so they can reuse them and speed up the job. But looking at the engineering standards, vertical forms for columns can safely come off in 16 to 24 hours. However, soffit formwork, those are the horizontal supports underneath your slabs and beams, must stay for a minimum of 3 to 7 days, with props immediately refixed. Do not let them remove supports early, or your brand new slab will permanently sag or even crack under its own weight.
Which brings us to the overall curing countdown. Remember, curing means keeping the concrete continuously wet. Day 1 is the pour. For standard ordinary Portland cement, you must aggressively cure for an absolute minimum of 7 days. If the weather is exceptionally hot and dry, that mandatory minimum jumps up to 10 days. And if your contractor used blended cements, you really should push it to a 14-day minimum. A fast job is a weak job. Enforce the timeline and keep it wet.
Briefly, alongside all that curing, proper compaction and surface finishing are absolutely required. If the concrete isn't properly tamped and compacted around the reinforcement, you'll get internal voids, which are basically just pockets of trapped air. Those voids weaken the structure and allow moisture to easily seep in and rust your steel bars years down the line.
And that brings us to the final phase, 5, your role as supervisor, the ultimate secret ingredient. I really hope you realize by now that you aren't just financing this project, you are the ultimate line of defense for your home's safety.
So, here is your actionable site supervisor checklist. Verify your ingredient quality upon delivery, check those cement dates. Stand right there and enforce the 1.5 meter drop rule during pours. Stop your contractor from removing formwork too early. Monitor the daily curing schedules to make sure the concrete stays wet. And demand proper reinforcement spacing before the pour ever happens. Catching a displaced steel bar before the concrete hardens, that is your ultimate superpower.
I want to leave you with this one provocative thought. Is your future home being built on blind trust or verifiable standards? You now have the knowledge and the checklist to walk onto your site, ask the right questions, and make sure your investment is built to last a century. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.